Welcome YouTubers, Patreons, Eskimos, if they have YouTube in Antarctica. Not sure where that came from. Maybe it's the white t-shirt, who knows. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Jazz tips for rockabilly players. I'm not sure you watching the video, you could be one of many different types of people. A new viewer, a recent viewer, someone who's been watching the channel for a long time. Either way, you may or may not know I am an avid jazz player. I actually have done more jazz gigs than I have rockabilly gigs, and I've done a lot of both. So I spend a lot of time playing jazz, doing arrangements, improvising, all that kind of stuff, and I actually teach that stuff as well. It's, just furthering my passion for music and the instrument. And that's really what jazz is about to me, so we'll get into that a little bit more later. But what I'm actually going to be doing in today's video is we're going to cover 5 tips, jazz-based tips for rockabilly players, and in each one I'm going to give you something that you can take away immediately and play around with. So we'll call them the big tips. So 5 overall tips with a big tip with each one. So sit back, relax, or maybe grab a guitar, whatever you like, and let's get into 5 jazz tips for rockabilly players. Okay, number 5, play the changes. So as a jazz player, you have to learn the chord progressions that you're going to be playing through. You really want to know them. Eventually, you get to a point where you hear them. Even if you sit in on a song that you don't know, hopefully you can start to follow them. But regardless, you need to know the changes. So why not, as a rockabilly player, make that a point of study? If you've got a tune, obviously most songs are only using 3 chords in basic rockabilly. Sometimes you get stuff outside of that. Neo rockabilly gets a bit more contemporary. But get to know the chords that are changing and see if you can do things to sort of, help communicate those changes. For example, if we're playing G, or let's do A. I've done a lot of G over the years. So we're in A. We know that we're going to D9. Now, even if you're not an educated player, that's okay. See if you can hear things in that change, hear things as the lead player that will help communicate those changes. So if I'm thinking of that A chord, and then I hear that D chord, what can I hear that shows the listener I know where I am? So obviously there's certain notes that change. That's something that's worth investigating. I'll get a little more into that. Then on the 5 chord, there's notes that are there that I wouldn't necessarily use on the 4 chord or the 1 chord. And here's the big tip. On the 4 chord, on the 1 chord, hopefully you've got something that you're doing in that key using pentatonics or licks, something you might have learnt from my channel. There's a lot of material on that stuff. When it goes to the 4 chord, for example, we really want to highlight the 3rd of that chord. So the 3rd fret on the 4th string into the 4th fret there, that little slide there, is a way that I would like to do that. We can do the same thing here. Okay, even if we just stick to A minor pentatonic, when that chord changes, okay, you now know that chord's changed. That's one way you can play the change. And the other big tip for this one is when we go to the 5 chord, move that note up 2 frets. So in the context of A minor pentatonic, that note there, and here, or here. Okay, that's the 3rd degree of the 5 chord. So that's an example, a really simple way of how we can play the changes or allude to the changes. 4 chord, 1 chord, just go back to your licks. On the 5 chord, it's a little Grady Martin, that kind of thing. He did little things like that. So that is 5. Number 4, chromatics. Don't be afraid to muck around with chromatics. Chromatics doesn't mean you just play a ream of notes one after the other, okay? You do want to think about it and design ideas chromatically, or walk into specific notes, like the notes that I just talked about, like those big tip notes in the previous one. For example, so I'm walking to the 3rd degree of the 4 chord. It could be anything. We don't even have to get too technical and talk about chord degrees or anything. Just a note that you think's going to work. Give yourself a little bit of room and a bit of a run up and walk into it. Even the A on the A chord and the D on the D chord, the E on the E chord, right? Anyway, I'm going to start jamming going off the rails there. So that's number 4. And the big tip there, was actually, I did the big tip there, walking in even just to the root notes of the chords. But yeah, just play around with it. Number 3, arpeggios. Jazz guys love arpeggios. We have to learn them. We have to know every chord. You want to know everything, okay? So why not learn them for rockabilly? Okay, so you've got, you could learn your dominant 7 arpeggios would be really, I'd really advise you learn those, and it will also help you play the changes, okay? You want to know all of those sorts of things. You want to know it over the 5 chord as well, or the 4 chord as well, which is a D in this case. And then the 5 chord. And then back to here. All of this is covered in my 12 rockabilly scales. That was a bit of a disaster, that video, because I edited it, I bounced it down, and then whatever I uploaded was some raw file. I still don't know how it happened. Computers, who knows? I'll stick to the mysteries of jazz guitar. So yeah, there's that. Learn those from that. If you need them or look them up. But that's a really big tip there. And I'm going to show you my big tip for this one. Actually, is this really cool trick that on the 5 chord of any rockabilly blues or whatever, anything really, jazz blues, a really cool trick is if I'm playing an E chord of some sort, I'm going to go back a 5th to the note directly behind it here on the 6th string, and I'm going to play a minor 7 arpeggio. Instead of playing over the E7. This is a great little jazz trick. There's heaps of these ideas in jazz. It's called superimposing. Okay, we're superimposing a B minor 7 over an E7, and it's got a really, really nice flavor. If I do it up an octave, it's just a really pretty sound. Jazz is full of that stuff. It's why I love delving into that stuff. I'm 35 now, and I started really digging into Wes Montgomery stuff in my mid-teens, and then really got into it in my early 20s. And now, whenever I'm playing rockabilly stuff, there's always different ideas, and it's the musical stuff that I like to pinch. If it's really fancy and complicated, it's not always going to work in rockabilly, etc. So, okay, so have a crack at that. Playing the minor 7 chord, a 5th back from your 5th chord. Okay, so all you do is wherever you're playing that 5th chord, just go from the 6th string. Try playing that over that chord in that moment of the song, once you've identified where that chord is. Okay, the next one, number 2, using jazz chords. Learn every jazz chord, any jazz chord. Just try them all and see if you can find a way to make them work in whatever it is that you're doing. Obviously playing rockabilly. That's kind of what Setzer's done, right? I mean, he's the man. So why wouldn't you do it too? You learn all the different chords. Now, I can't show you them all today, but the big tip today will be this little nugget here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how we can play, and we can do this in an easy way where we don't have to use every string. We're going to play an A7 like this. Okay, so we're going to go 5, 6, 5, 5, just like that. And that's a really nice way to play a dominant 7 chord, but it actually allows us to add chord extensions like the 13 there, the 7 again. Okay, so it's just still a 7 chord. 13, sharp 5, okay, and by flattening the first finger I'm getting the 5th fret, so it's actually 5, 6, 5, 5, okay, so that's a really great one, and that just lines up with wherever you're playing your first chord of your rockabilly blues or rockabilly, your rockabilly thing. You can be up here, and then this one, great for when you're about to change to the 4 chord, okay. So then what we can do on that chord is we can do this thing, 4, 5, 5, 5. Okay, that's a really, really nice type of chord. And that is straight from, late 40s and early 50s jazz guitar players, using that stuff. Probably even earlier, Eddie Lang, Django Reinhardt, Carl Kress, all those kind of guys. Can't mention Eddie Lang without mentioning Carl Kress. That wouldn't be fair. So, and Charlie Christian, of course. So that's that's a way we can play our 4 chord, because this would be our D. This is our 3rd degree of D. That's a D9. we can just drop off the 5th string, and then we can move that up for the 5 chord as well. Okay, and we can add little extensions off that if we like as well. Okay, so yeah, totally really good fun stuff. Now let's talk about number 1. Okay, we're at number 1 now. This one is, makes sense. It's probably the most important one, and something you might have got a sense of throughout the rest, and that is to wear a jazzy hat, or wear a jazzy hat backwards. That's really important. I'm just kidding. That's ridiculous. Number 1, learn more about your instrument. That's the main thing about playing jazz. Okay, playing jazz is not just about being, intellectually, superior with music or anything like that. Or, I don't consider myself just a jazz player, and most jazz players don't really either. It's just that it's a great ground to explore your instrument. When you're doing a standard or a chart, it's actually set a course, if you will, that allows you to explore your instrument with some definition. If we had no definition, if we just said, free jamming, and I've discussed this before, I'm not a fan of it, the real free stuff, that's just nothing to me. But when you actually set a structure, now you really get to explore what works within that and see how well you know your instrument. So it's really about knowing your instrument. So tip number 1 is learn more about your instrument. And it's not just guitar theory. Okay, it's also learning licks. If you like the sound of something, try and learn it. Even if you don't learn at full speed, but you can walk over the notes and see what's happening, you are actually developing your knowledge of the instrument. So that is the biggest tip, okay? Nothing to do with wearing a stupid hat. It's all about just learning more about your instrument. So, guys, for me, it's an absolute joy to know more. And if you love guitar, if we're going to talk about theory, one question I have for you all, if you really love your instrument, wouldn't you like to know a little bit more? Okay, you don't have to learn it all at once. If you learn one note a week, okay, in a couple years, you know every note on the fretboard quite well. So that's the sort of thing that we miss. We don't make that small investment because, I don't know, we're just not cultured that way. It's sort of like all in or nothing. But guys, you can learn a ton. Folks, I should say, you can learn a ton by just a little bit every week. And if you learn, 3 notes at a time, E, F, G. Okay, so speaking of which, I'm actually going to do, through my Patreon, I'm going to do a course teaching the whole fretboard. So if you are a fan of that, stay tuned if you are a member of the Patreon. Anyway, that's it, guys. So I'm going to play you out, and thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for the next video. Don't forget to check out the Patreon. Don't forget, I've got some merch there if you want to buy a coffee cup or something like that. And don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe and all those sorts of things. All right.